Islam family.
Islam.
Islam.
We were blessed this Sunday by Nature El Bay from New Jersey. We give thanks, Islam brother. Your dissertation was wonderful, and we look forward to building with you again this Sunday. We will have part 2 of that lecture. Today, being Monday, February 13th, 2012. Again, it's still Moorish Heritage Month, but before we can get into that full celebration in some future time, or at least for the youth, we have to first correct Black history. Because when there's an error, you correct it. If you don't correct it, then you risk repeating mistakes of the past. So, myself, Tesba Sarbe, Ranshi Kujo Adwa El, we're gonna continue on the same vibe that we've been on for the past couple weeks. And before we get into it, we'll just rise with the prayer. We rise and give honors also to Prophet Noble Drew Ali, who came and brought us everything that we need. We rise and give honors to Moorish American National Government. Rise and give honors to active Moors like Taj Tariq Bey, Sister Ross Mariah Bey, Alim Bey, Jose Pimenta Bey, Dr. Jose Pimenta Bey, Dr. Hakeem Bey, etc. We rise and give honors to all the Moors around the world in the struggle, physical, spiritual, political, whatever kind of struggle you're in. It's solidarity, and we see you out there. So we struggle in the way that we know that we must, because being here in North America, even marching has a certain fragility and certain uselessness to it. At this time, it is imperative for our people to learn law, to know the law, and to enforce the constraints and the laws that have been put into place in order to protect them and protect their rights. And when we understand these things, and we understand that we are the creditors, we are the indigenous, and we are the ones we are the government, okay? And that is the perspective we come from with love. So, with 5 on the left and 2 on the right, Allah, the Mother and Father of the universe.
Allah, the Mother and Father of the universe.
The Mother and Father of love.
Mother and Father of love.
Truth. Peace.
Freedom.
And justice. Allah is our protector.
Allah is our protector.
Our guide.
And
our salvation. By night. And by day. Through His and her holy prophet. Noble Drew Ali. Amen.
Ameen.
Ashe.
Ashe.
Hotep.
Sila.
Islam. So, I'm just going to start in by reading a little bit from this is Moorish Guide, Winter Solstice Edition, January 8th, 2012. Okay. This is an excerpt published Friday, September 28th by Noble Drew Ali. It is not unusual for a newspaper to make its debut in the city of Chicago. The past years have been many such come and many such go. The Moorish Guide, taking its initial bow to the public, knows not what the future awaits it, but throwing its efforts on the sides of right, reason, and tolerance, we hope that we might make the grade. The Moorish Guide enters the field of journalism with malice toward none and charity to all. It is not our purpose to disregard the work of other splendid journals. It is not our purpose to fail to give due attention and space to all American citizens, individuals and organizations alike, who are working in their chosen fields of endeavor for the progress and development of all American citizens and all American constitutions. We hope to cooperate with them in the intensive and grueling battle for universal justice. The Moorish Guide feels that the greatest weapon in the hands of our group today in America is our press. The truth will never be told about a disadvantaged minority by the general press of any country, whether that minority be racial, political, or religious. Unless we express ourselves through papers of our own, the truth about us will not be told. Many of our accomplishments, many of the beautiful things, many of the hopeful things, and events which mark the progress of our group will go unrecorded were it not for papers of our own. Our papers are our only hope of shoveling ourselves out from under the avalanche of lies that are annually let loose upon us. A strong free press is the best possible safeguard of the liberties in general, promotion and defense of the interests of strong free people. So that was just an excerpt to express that common sense understanding that the best place to get the information about Moors is from Moors. The best place to get the truth is from someone who has no reason to lie to you. So, Moors, Temple number 5, supporting Temple number 5 in Toronto, please. We have flyers. We're giving flyers. These are to share with people, to give them that direct information from the source. Okay? I give thanks. And Moors all around, Moors who in New Jersey put together this paper, give thanks. And so, again, going to more scholars. I'm going to read an excerpt from Golden Age of the Moor, edited by Ivan van Sertima. Okay, this is page 305. Repeatedly asked to deny his newly found religion, Bilal only uttered, Ahad, Ahad, God is one. In the evening he was led by children to the streets of Mecca with a rope around his neck, then taken back at night so they could bargain with him. Lasting for days, the torture only brought the same words to the mouth of Bilal, Ahad, Ahad. When Prophet Muhammad's closest companion, Abu Bakr, first caliph of Islam, heard of this, he went to Umayyah and paid him a large sum for his release. Ali Baghdadi, who narrates the story of Bilal's life, tells us how Muhammad was very pleased to see Bilal free for the first time in his life. After the migration of the messenger and his followers to Al-Madinah, he asked Bilal to be the first mu'adhin in Islam, whose duty was to call the faithful to prayer 5 times daily. When the war broke out between the Muslims and Quraysh, Bilal took part in the first battle in Islam, the Battle of Badr. In Bilal's honor, Prophet Muhammad chose Ahad as the slogan of this great battle. Together with Muhammad, Bilal participated in all battles in defense of Islam. When Muhammad and 10,000 Muslims marched into Mecca 8 years later as victors, the Prophet, accompanied by Bilal and other dictated companions, went to Al-Kaaba, the holy temple built by Abraham, and destroyed all the idols. Bilal climbed the wall of Al-Kaaba, the most sacred shrine in Islam, and with a beautiful and solemn voice he called the faithful to prayers. Thousands of Muslims repeated after Bilal, God is the greatest. Upon the death of Muhammad, Bilal made a request of the Caliph, Abu Bakr, to allow him to continue to struggle in the path of Allah. But Abu Bakr wanted Bilal to remain in Medina and continue to call prayer. Bilal replied, if you freed me to become your own slave, let it be so. However, if you freed me for the sake of Allah, let me go to him. His wishes were granted and he joined the soldiers of Allah whose mission at that time was to liberate Syria from Byzantine oppression and domination. Bilal made his final call to prayer when he visited Omar, the second caliph of Islam, in Syria. He later died in the city of Damascus. Fulfilling the promise Muhammad made that he was a man of paradise, it is said that Bilal had longed for the day when he could join the Prophet Muhammad in the house of eternity. Okay, so that's to point out that the first Mezouin, the first caller to prayer of Islam, according to history, is Bilal, the Abyssinian. And accordingly, after Muhammad's death, Bilal wanted to struggle in the path of Allah. He didn't want to call to prayer anymore. He wanted to go out, right, and let me go to him, right? said, if you freed me for the sake of Allah, let me go to him. So if you want to pray all day and give praises, then do so. But if you want to do something for the sake of Allah, then do something. Right? Do something. Don't do nothing. So that's why we're here. Like Grant, she said, smashing Black History Month, spreading this information, and teaching the people about their birthrights and their nationality. Because nationality is the order of the day, right? You have something? Just gotta look up.
This is from, for the record, Islam, Kudro Arol, the chronological history of the Negro in America. So this is a Negro book, book about Negroes. By Peter M. Bergman, assisted by a staff of compilers under the direction of Mort N. Bergman. Published 1817. Harper Row Publishers. And it's the 1969 copyright. So this is under the section called 1929, page 441. On June 21st, largely through the efforts of Congressman DePriest, the Washington Auditorium was open to Negro organizations. On August 30th, Representative DePriest addressed the Harlem rally of 2,500 at the Abyssinian Baptist Church. You will never be able to get what you want politically unless you elect leaders who will fight for your interests. White people, as a rule, elect Negroes that they can control. Negroes will never get a square deal unless you elect your own leaders. Don't complain about racial discrimination. Change it by practical politics. Remember that no one can really lead you but one who has been Jim Crowed as you have. Lieutenant Colonel Fillmore of the 365th New York Infantry, a Negro candidate for district leader, said at this meeting that 90% of the population of the district is made up of Negroes. We feel that the time has come when we must have our leader, one of our own race, and that the emoluments of office belong to us. This is a fight to determine whether the 10% white population shall control the district in which more than 300,000 Negroes live. And we'll go to page 443. Some 1,200 delegates attended Marcus Garvey's UNIA 6th Annual Convention. Delegates came from the United States, the West Indies, Europe, and Africa. Some attempt was made to reorganize the Black Star Liner shipping line. The Black Star shipping line. Marcus Garvey, while jailed in Kingston, Jamaica, for contempt of court, was elected to the Kingston Council in St. Andrew Corporation. In Chicago, the NAACP started a campaign against bus companies that practice segregation. The Urban League organized a Jobs for Negroes movement to boycott merchants whose customers were Negroes but who did not hire Negroes. Boycotts took place in St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Cleveland, and other Midwestern cities. The campaign had limited success. By November, according to the National Urban League column in the Chicago Defender, unemployment had affected Negro workers all over the nation. From 1929 through the next decade, cotton production dropped from 43 million acres to 23 million. In this period, 3 out of 4 Negro farmers received at least 40% of their income from cotton. Negroes produced approximately 1/3 of the southern cotton crop. In this year, 7 Negroes were lynched. In Prince Anne, Maryland, a fight between a white man and a Negro over the right of Negroes to congregate in white business communities on Saturday night resulted in a riot. 300 Negroes were driven from town. In Lincoln, Nebraska, a mob of whites drove 200 Negroes from town after a white policeman was shot. Governor Weaver declared that those persons driven out must be permitted to return, and that if any further difficulties ensued, martial law would be instituted. A Negro, Claude D. Green, manager of local Chicago club, was shot to death by 6 members of the Moorish Temple of America, a cult organized in 1913 which had formerly used this club for meetings. At the time of his death, Green was allied with a faction opposed to Timothy Drew, known as Prophet Noble Drew Ali, founder of the cult. The Prophet was accused of the crime. He died 5 months later. It was commonly believed that the ordeal of his trial, together with the treatment he received at the hands of the police, were directly responsible for his death. Following Drew's death, a gun battle broke out between Chicago policemen and members of the Moorish Temple of America. 1 member of the society and 1 police officer were killed when the Negro police came to a building occupied by the Moorish Society in search of Charles Kirkman Bey, reported to have been kidnapped the day before by 4 imported gunmen.
So, you have any more on that?
No.
So just a little bit on the priest. So he spoke about the priest in the first excerpt. And I showed a picture from the newspaper, from the Moorish guy from Jersey. And under the picture it says, Prophet Noble Drew Ali and Congressman Oscar the Priest at the Prophet's birthday celebration. Okay? The title reads, The Priest Asks All to Study Constitution. It says, the priest was a member of the Moorish Science Temple of America under the leadership of Prophet Noble Drew Ali in 1928. And with the assistance of 3,000 Moorish Americans of Chicago, he was able to be elected as the first Asiatic congressman. The priest held his office at Unity Hall, 3140 Indiana Avenue, which was the home office of the Moorish Science Temple of America, so there was a strong relationship between Noble Drew Ali and Oscar the Priest. In fact, the priest also spoke at the Moorish American First Annual Convention held at Unity Hall. There is no doubt that these 2 constitutionalists worked together to restore the free national standards of law and to make sure every citizen answered up to the constitutional standards of law by names and principles. Okay, this isn't like made up stuff. This isn't, so long ago that it's, what I mean?
This is not the white man's history.
This is not the white man's history. This is not the first black congressman. Right? It's the first Asiatic congressman. Well, according as far as they know. Right? Whoever wrote the article. So continuing. Prophet Noble Drew Ali strongly emphasized in the divine warning for the nations, for all true American citizens, to help him in his mission to get his people back into the constitutional fold of government. The priest helped to further that mission in a political venue, directly to those who claimed to know law. Those representatives of our government had a public oath reflecting their fiduciary duty, in which they were sworn in to exercise in good faith according to their understanding. And since the Constitution has been misplaced from the educational teachings of government and the public school system, the Constitution has become the secondary interest to the citizens in general. To be a citizen of this free national republic of the United States of America, you must first claim your descent name and have a fundamental knowledge of the laws of this country, i.e., the Constitution, and take an oath of allegiance to support the Constitution of the country and state where you domicile. If these constitutional requirements are not met by the citizens, we become classified as artificial citizens, possessing privileged citizenship regulated by the unconstitutional 14th Amendment, which are the modern-day black codes that was founded to regulate the slave trade. The Constitution reflects the agreement between the natural citizens of the land and the representatives and guarantees a republic form of government. To ignore this is to agree to enslavement.
And
Okay.
just to put things in perspective, the 14th, 15th Amendment in the Bill of Rights is equivalent to the Canada Act.
The Canada Act.
Yeah,
Okay.
Meaning,
right? The act that Canada says is, you know, from the British North American Act, right? And then it has the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in there, and right? Okay, so the idea of Charter of Rights and Freedoms, right, is a granted privilege. Because the privilege is only granted because the receiver of the privilege is artificial, or they're fake, or they're not real. They're pretending to play a position that isn't their position to play. That's why the Book of Negroes would tell you about Moorish Science Temple in there.
Islam.
Right? Islam. But you wouldn't hear the Moors talk about Negroes only to say that you're not it. You're not gonna have Moorish books talking about, yeah, well, the Negroes were doing whatever. But you have to have a Negro book talking about the Moors,
Gotcha.
right? Because it's their history too, even though they don't know it. So with Oscar the Priest and Noble Drew Ali and saying to enforce the Constitution, they're only talking the first 10 Bill of Rights. They're not even going into anything else as far as the Constitution is concerned. Because everything after that is a fraud,
It also comes after them, don't it?
right?
Like the amendments, 14th, whatever.
Right. Yeah, they're after. Because the main ones are laid out in the 10. And there's 10 commandments, and there's this theme that they're taken from to create what they call, you know, the United States government, and, you know, they have tanks and planes and army and all that type of stuff. But it's a disguise because even they're Negroes, because they're not being what they're supposed to be either. They're Europeans, so they're not even supposed to be here doing anything of that nature. Because this isn't their jurisdiction to do that in. And this was the line that Noble Drew Ali was drawing. That, well, okay, the first issue is status. Because if you don't have a correct status, then jurisdiction is going to be assumed. If your status doesn't specify, right? So it's like with what Grand Sheet Nature was talking about last night with the Al-Moroccan and the American and the Moroccan and the Moorish, right? And that it's all relative, but you know, because of the sorcery, right?
Yeah.
Because of the sorcery on keeping us away from more. You know, we will accept anything. We'll accept that we don't even come from this planet, and that we're from some other galaxy, some other universe. And on this Earth plane, there's a book that says that there's people called Moors. Then there's another book, and there's different languages, and it says that, okay, there's these people that exist, that are dark-skinned people that they're African or they're Negroes or they're, but ultimately they're Moors.
Yeah.
And people still don't want to accept the fact that that's what their identity is. They'll accept everything else as their identity. Everything. Like why would the congressman, right, who just happened to be the first black congressman to get elected, unless the members of the Moor Science Temple, right, because Noble Drew Ali told the Moors, keep your old name, right, because we're going to use that still.
Yeah.
Because you're not just going to jump out of occupation. Because you say that you're a Moor, you think they still wouldn't put a noose around your neck?
Not take anything with you and have any kind of...
Right? So, the position is status from the door. Because if I have one, then you have to have one. But this is my land. So anybody else who is here, right, and they don't show allegiance to the actual inheritors, then they're supposed to go back where they come from. It's not anything of arrogance or whatever, but you ask anybody, and they'll tell you that this is the Moroccan Empire over here. And just like Grand Sheik was breaking down, Moroccan is synonymous with Moor. So it's the Moorish Empire. Or you could call it the Moroccan Empire, depending on how you want to look at it. But regardless of how you look at it, it's dark-skinned people that were the indigenous Aboriginal people of whatever the landmass is. And that was something that Noble Drew Ali was restoring. He wasn't making up something. He didn't have a good idea. He said, let me just do this. Right? It was a restoration. But because everybody was, they have a chronological history of the Negro, so even that was a position for some people back then. Just like Noble Drew Ali saying, I'm a Moor, there was people pushing for Negro stuff.
Yeah.
Right? And if they're gonna mention, like how they talk about, I know and the cult and whatever, right?
Yeah.
Regardless, for them to get this much information, they would have had to be members that sold out and just have information. They have some information sitting at their house, right? As far as information about the Moors is concerned, because you're not going to get this much information unless you read the FBI files, right? So to even go that far, you either have to be a free Moorish Master Mason or you're a Moor to get this far in the information that they're talking about in this chronological history of the Negro. That Noble Drew Ali said that we're not that. He said this should. I hope that this movement's not mistaken with any Back to Africa movement. This is not that either, right? And this is not color. This is an actual, real, tangible thing. But the problem is that the people don't want to accept the fact that it's theirs. Because they've been trained to get stuff. They've been put in a psychological, perpetual, backward motion, right, of getting stuff and not giving either. Just getting. And if they don't get, then they sulk and cry and complain and say that it's racism and say that the devil did it and say that everybody, the thing in the closet.
And we're a cursed nation.
And we're a cursed nation
And
because our
back it up with
skin's
religion,
black,
too.
so I'm gonna go have to bleach my skin and I'm gonna have to perm my hair and bleach my hair and then we end up lost
Yeah.
in oblivion. Just because simple thing, nationality. What's your nationality? Anybody, right? And then people are gonna speak up for their nation. It's only natural, right? It's like talking with this colored girl, black Negro colored girl, right? That's supposedly conscious, right? Just ask the question. So, all right then. If you're not gonna say that you're a Moor, even though you just told me that Moor means black, and you're telling me that you're a black person or you're African, but you don't want to say that you're a Moor, then what's your nationality? Well, my nationality is I belong to the Melanin Nation. All right. Where is the Melanin Nation? Like, where is that on the planet? Well, wherever melanin people are. Yeah, but that's not a geographical location. Like, where? Or you're just thinking like a European. Right? Like this, it must be sorcery. And that's why only certain people gravitate to this. Not everybody gravitates to the Moorish paradigm in this time frame. Because they're shrouded with Negro, black, colored things. Every day, all day, they'll push that down your throat. Have you gagging.
A lot of it is religious. A lot of it is religious because I've heard people say, and lots of people, and sometimes some educated people too, and they'll say things like, "We are a cursed nation," and it's in the Bible, and all this kind of thing. So, this is destined for us. This is our lot in life, and we'll get our reward in heaven.
Right.
So
this is what they actually believe.
So with that religion, cursed nation, why do the Jews not stick to that? Why are the Jews known as like rulers of the world right now? If they're supposed to be an enslaved people, like how come they were able to? And that's also, when I say Jews, the people of today who call themselves Jews. Yeah. But they never let that hold them. You know what I'm saying? So why is it that someone else is letting that hold them?
I tell you, it's this whole religious thing, straight up. You hear people talking about that kind of thing, and they all want to bring up the story of Ham. That's their reference point. Ham was black.
Yeah.
Okay? And all his issue were destined, just like Eve bit the apple, and all women are supposed to suffer because of that. Ham was black, and all of his descendants are supposed to suffer. This is what we're here for. We have to fulfill that prophecy, and when we die, we're real good. We're going to go to heaven, and we're going to get our reward there. And this is what is beat into their heads, and this is what they believe. Okay, seriously.
And that's why we're saying that it's sorcery.
Yeah.
Which we can say religion then, right? But it's sorcery.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then the other thing, if I'm not mistaken, it nowhere in the Bible does it say Ham is cursed.
Well, this is what these people
what happens
tell
is, Noah's in the tent, and then Ham has a son named Lamech, and then Noah curses Lamech, right?
Okay.
Either Lamech or Canaan. But instead of looking into that word Lamech or looking into that word Canaan and associating with that, they want to say, oh, well, since it was Ham's son, then we'll just call ourselves Hamites. When Ham had a whole bunch of other sons who weren't cursed. So it doesn't even logically make sense. But I don't have my Bible with me today, so we're going to look up that one, and we'll have that one for next class, because that's a good point. You can't say that you're cursed because you're the grandson of someone whose one of his sons were cursed.
Mhm.
Unless you are the son of the one who was cursed. You might just be a nephew. And if you're a nephew, then you're not cursed. Because you didn't come from him. You came from his brother.
Yeah, but it is.
But that's just, you know what I mean? A small detail which we'll jump on that if it turns out to be
For me,
what it
for me
is.
also, like everybody saying that Ham is black. Yeah, I still can't find in the Bible where it says that. Like,
Right, that
I
too.
don't know what type of wordage they use to make people say that that's the African black nation that is being cursed.
Mm.
But I don't see how. And if these are all Noah's children, then why is only one black?
Right. It's not even.
He was the bad one.
Yeah, but
Right.
but that's what I'm saying. Like, all three of them going.
Mhm.
That whole story includes 3 different sons.
Yeah.
But only one of them is black.
Yeah, but the point is, people who go with that kind of thinking, I guess, for want of a better word, are just being told something by someone, and
Yeah.
again, it's
Well,
some
that's-
clergy person usually.
But that's the problem. Also,
Yeah.
do your own research.
Thank you, but that's the problem right there. If you got they look at their doctors as God, they look at their clergy people as God, they look at their teachers as God, and they don't question anything, especially religion. Okay, when your priest or your pastor or your deacon or whatever comes and says, "This is a cup," and we know darn well it's a bottle, you don't question that. They
Yeah.
just say, "Okay, that's a cup because pastor said so," you know,
Mm.
and that's it. There's none of this free thinking. It's all about this is these. Well, look at the 10 Commandments. When you come from a premise of "Thou shalt not," come on, that's not how we used to run things. We used to be, we used to govern ourselves,
Yeah.
right? But all of that's gone.
And what's funny too, when you were talking about priests, it just reminded me about Oscar the priest,
Okay.
and then I went off on a tangent, and then I got everybody hype on the tangent.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, so we'll come back, and it's relevant too because speaking about church and so forth, Oscar the priest, right, himself is gonna mention churches in combination with the Constitution. So this is from the same paper. Quote: "I am very anxious that those of my racial group should be better acquainted with the Constitution and thereby more clearly understand their rights. There are several states of the Union that base their suffrage upon the ability to read and interpret the Constitution. Wishing to carry on a campaign of education on the Constitution, I am writing to ask your cooperation in getting this matter before churches,
Mm-hmm.
schools, and societies of every description with which you are associated.
Mm-hmm.
If you can consistently do so, will you have the people read and discuss the Constitution and the amendments thereto section by section until they become thoroughly acquainted with it. As loyal American citizens, we owe allegiance to the laws of our country and should know the contents of this document in order that we may protect our rights accordingly. When one understands the Constitution, he or she will be in a position to ask his or her congressional candidate for support of every section and every amendments to the Constitution. Those candidates who are not willing to do so should not be elected to office. Those who are willing to do so should be earnestly supported and elected."
Mm-hmm.
So Oscar the priest, okay, the first Asiatic congressman, clearly stated that I want a campaign of education on the Constitution, and I want this matter before churches, schools, and societies of every description. Right? He didn't leave out. He said, "Well, go to the schools and go to your societies, but since church is holy, don't talk about it there." No, he said church too.
Yeah.
And discuss it thoroughly, section by section, like break down the Constitution.
And that's because of the amendment. That's because of an amendment, of the 10 amendments.
Right.
Why he can even make that statement that the churches have to be constitutional too.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has to follow the Constitution. Nobody's omitted from following the Constitution just because of your status or your station or your post or whatever, you claim that power it is that you have.
It's that one of the two things that you asked that should ever be asked for someone to be here on this land. Like in the ideal world, people should just go where they please and live where they please. But at the very least, you could at least ask a person, okay, where did you come from? Like where are you coming from that you're here now? Where were you before? And okay, now that we know that, we're just gonna take note of that. And then the other thing is, these are the laws of the land. Like this is how we govern ourselves, and just you know what I mean? Like it's just common sense. Like this is what it is around here. And there's nothing wrong with the 7 articles of the Constitution, nothing untoward, nothing oppressive, right? Nothing wrong with the 10 amendments. So 7 articles, 10 amendments. Like if you can read, then what's the big deal? Do that, know that stuff inside and out, and then you have your freedom. That's for people immigrating into here, right? And then, like he said, when one understands the Constitution, he or she will be in a position to ask his or her congressman candidate for support of every section and every amendment to the Constitution, right? So when you understand it, understand that there's a we the people, and then there's a United States of America. That in the preamble, before you even get into the Constitution. So first is to know which one are you. Well, if you're indigenous, then you're we the people. Right? And you have to understand that the Constitution is for the people coming into the land where you have already been. And so then to protect your rights, you hold them to the Constitution. You say, follow this so that I don't get hurt. Peace. Right? And then some might ask, well, okay, so then what do the indigenous people follow? They follow their own, whatever they decide. They sit together and they, right, make up whatever rules they want in whatever form, even if it's oral, right? Which is, by the way, like most people know, the method of most indigenous cultures in North America is all oral. Talk about, oh, well, we have this story, and, well, is it written down anywhere? No, it's just oral, because we don't have to write anything down, because it's just us here. When people start coming, we still don't have to write anything down for ourselves because we were here first. It's not a matter of superiority. It's just like we were here. So if you came here, just follow this Constitution, which is just. There's nothing wrong with it, and that's cool. And you can be here. It's really that simple. But if you get straight and get, you know what I mean? Well, I looked up more Science Temple online, and I saw cult, and they wear fezzes, and yeah, like stick to the basics first. Of course, there's all kinds of other stuff that we do. We have the right. Indigenous people are gonna do whatever they do, right? Don't go to other people to find out about the indigenous people. Go to them. Right? Like you're not gonna go to Australia and then not visit the Aborigines, right? And then get all kinds of paraphernalia and what do you call it? You know what I mean? Toys and keepsakes, and then say, yeah, I went to Australia and wow, those Aborigines. Like if you're gonna go, then go and, you know, at least for a day and go check them out, meet them. Like I saw the Australian people, like the actual, not the, you know.
Yeah, it's
the
colonized
colonized.
to hear from, as they say, the horse's mouth.
From the horse's
Like
mouth.
I can't ask Cujo about you, and then just say whatever he tells me. That's who you are.
That's right. And just take that.
Without coming straight to you.
Right. You might get an idea, and it might be very accurate, but in order to confirm it and to qualify it, then you're gonna come and meet me and say, okay, yeah, Cujo said this, and yeah, he was right. He said you're a nice guy. Yeah, you are a nice guy. Then it's qualified. Then it's concrete. So I'm just gonna finish reading. There's two more paragraphs about from that same article. So it says, Congressman is a part of the legislative branch of government that is empowered to make law according to the checks and balances described in Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution, which also consists of a House of Representatives and a Senate. Not only does this department make law, but they also have the obligation to represent the natural people of the land that constitutes the state body politic. The priest, being the first Asiatic congressman, was a great advantage to the so-called black community of Chicago because the duty of the congressman is to express the will of the people.
Mhm.
One of the important elements the priest understood through his teachings from Noble Drew Ali in the Moorish Science Temple of America was that black was not the proper name of our people, and as long as we keep clinging to the names and principles that dilute to slavery, we would be outside of the constitutional fold of government. In the priest's reasons why he is requesting the support of the education of the Constitution, he has quoted the several states in the Union based their suffrage on the reading and interpretations of the Constitutions, as I read before. The word suffrage means the right to vote or the process in which to vote. This is key to understanding a republic form of government. Voting is a right protected by the Constitution, exercised by the natural citizens of the state. Noble Drew Ali taught that by claiming a free national name, we can cast a ballot at the polls under the state's constitution and not as a granted privilege, which it has been for many generations. Natural persons, i.e., free national citizens, have constitutionally protected rights, and Negroes, blacks, whites, etc., i.e., colored names, have privileges. You can write your congressman to address these issues and don't elect them if they're not willing to do so. Right? So then if people want to talk about, well, what a plan, so this is what you guys are about, what should I do? Well, there's one step right there. Right? There's one step right there. Write your congressman and just, yeah, so, are you gonna, if you're in office for the next term, are you gonna, do according to the Constitution? Are you gonna follow it? Are you gonna stay within the bounds of the Constitution? If they can't give you a positive answer, then it's like you can't just break the law being a lawgiver. Like you're not just a citizen, but you're a lawgiver. Like you're the person who's supposed to make the laws and keep the laws. You know what I mean? Keep perpetuating the law. And then you're gonna go outside of the structure of the law. That doesn't make any sense. So that's Oscar the Priest. And so it says, yeah, so it's from 1928. And it was through the assistance of 3,000 Moorish Americans of Chicago that he was elected. Right? Moors coming together and using their voice and their power, right? In unity.
And Noble Drew Ali told the Moors that we need to have our own paper. So don't, it's nothing personal that we're not reading the full article, right? The idea is to go get the paper. Just like you're going to go get whatever, you're going to put 50 cents in the box and go get the local paper, or you're going to pick up the free one, or you're going to go get Final Call, or 5% newspaper, or Black Panther newspaper. Okay, well, the Moors paper is resurrected, right? There's been Moors doing Moorish papers, like after a prophet passed. It mightn't have been under Moorish guide, but there was Moorish papers. There was Moors in St. Louis with papers, right? That's still on the record today. That there's people that still have probably stacks of those, right? And it was he said to do the paper so that that becomes the public record.
Yeah.
Why are we Moors gonna witness our own papers and then go file it in their county courthouse? Right? And then say that they don't have jurisdiction on something. That's why active Moors push. It's not about papers and filing UCC and claiming straw man and discharging debts and all that. It's about being who your ancient foremothers and forefathers were, without doubt or contradiction. And no man could change man's descendant's name unless his hands extend further than Allah's hand, which is highly unlikely. And everything got laid out, and people ran off to go do whatever with it.
Well, and you know, the other point about having the newspaper, and this is so true, this is why the Prophet, I believe, told us to have newspapers. You know, it's because the mainstream papers are not written by us. They're not controlled by us. They're controlled by big business. They're controlled by the CIA. They're controlled by the FBI and stuff like that.
Excerpt.
So there's no sense, you know, we can read them till the cows come home, but we're never ever going to get the truth from them because they're always going to have their own slant on everything. So why should we continue reading? I'm not saying not to read other people's papers to see what's going on. I'm saying you have to read them critically for one thing, and if you're that interested in the truth, then you should be looking at all different sources, you know.
Right.
Certainly. I mean, I'll read anything, really. You see me picking up papers in the subway all the time because they're free, and there's always something in them. Maybe it's true, maybe it ain't, but I got to make up my mind, too, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Take it with a grain of salt.
Take it with a grain of salt,
Use
but
your own judgment.
we all know, like, how come now all of a sudden they got a free metro and they got a free 24 hours? What's the agenda behind that?
Yeah.
They didn't do it just
Free.
because
Color.
they had extra
Color too.
Because it wasn't free
Thank
for
you.
them to
Color
print
too.
it.
Well,
So it
that's the
costs
whole
money,
point.
so
In order for these people to be putting out this free newspaper every day, there has to be something behind it. They don't just do something for nothing.
And not just that, but they stand out on the corners
And
Yeah.
making
in
the
the
calls.
bitterest weather, handing out these free
Handing out these
papers.
free
Yes.
papers.
Because I see them when I'm going to work 6 in the morning,
Yeah.
and I'm looking at them like, how much are you getting paid to stand
Yeah.
here to
Yeah.
do this?
Who
Like,
are you, yo?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who are
And I'm
you?
like, God, feel for you. These
Mhm.
people are bundled up and
It's true.
handing out a free paper. So there's something going on there. Money's,
Of course,
It's
there's
going
money. There's
on.
no two ways about that. But it's
Yeah.
propaganda
yeah.
and it's distraction. That's
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
that is.
It's yeah,
There's nothing
exactly.
of
It's to
value
keep
in those
you
papers.
because it's like with all these world conflicts that they're going on with, like the Afghanistan stuff, the Libya, all these other countries that they're going on with their stuff, and if you only received the American media of what's going on, you're going to look at these people as what the American media is calling them, terrorists. But then when you start to get media from the other side and you start hearing, then your view changes because you start hearing another
Two
side
sides
to
of
the
the
story.
story.
You're like, whoa, I didn't know this. Like, you know, like even with Gaddafi, how they murdered him, and then you start looking him up on YouTube and seeing him speaking to the UN, and you're like, this is not the Gaddafi that the media was painting to me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and then you start understanding why they started making him a bad guy, because he was speaking out against them in the UN, and you know, then they play their little media games, rile up the population to make people say, yeah, let's go after this guy. He's a terrorist, when he's really just
fast too. Like less than a year,
exactly.
just a quick campaign, just
Yeah,
media.
because he
Just,
was trying to get them to come back to uphold the things they're supposed to, the Constitution and whatnot,
Right.
and pay homage to the people who they're supposed to be. But instead, they're trying to kill these people off.
Yeah, it's natural.
Yeah, so you do have to. That's a big thing. You always have, when you get one side of the story, you should try to investigate the other side.
That's
Same thing with this Morse thing.
Right.
I don't think that any of us is just sitting here
With
being-
one side of the story.
exactly
Yeah.
like you tell me more stuff. I more look up the people who are talking against the Moors to hear what they say.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like brother Cairo says, like when he's first got on the information, he was like, "Yo, I challenged myself to find a flaw in this."
Yeah.
He's like, I went and I tried to find like where's the scam and like what was wrong with it, anything. And he's like, he didn't challenge himself to find what was right about it. He challenged himself to find what was wrong.
That's right.
And it's been months now, and he's still with it,
Yeah.
right? And like and then he still looks up what could be wrong. Like he's the guy who called all the other cities when they had the proclamations and just verified. Oh, did you actually send out those proclamations? Yeah, we did. Oh, okay,
Did you read them?
right. Yeah, but yeah. So, and that's was his own.
Truth is truth.
You know what I mean?
That's,
Search.
That's it. That's exactly where I was going though. Truth is truth,
Truth is truth.
because truth is truth. Because even your African historians, they don't talk crap about the Moors. The historians, the people that these people revere as the ones that brought them the knowledge, you know, whatever, wrote books about their ancestors. Now they know about their African history. Even those people know, even if some of them look like Moors and they don't claim themselves to be Moors, they're still Moors. And
That's
once a Moor is looking at more from a third party perspective, then they give up the identity.
That's right.
So now you're open for the feeding now, because you gave it up. You looked at it from a third party perspective.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right? You're looking at the Moors. Okay, well then, if those are the Moors, who are you? Right? So this is from Introduction to African Civilization, John G. Jackson. I know a lot of you African scholar guys have this book, right? I know you do. Don't even front like you don't have this book, right? You know you have this book. And this is from the chapter, right? This is John G. Jackson, right? African scholar. This is from the chapter called Africa and the Civilizing of Europe, the Empire of the Moors. This is the cover. 3 pages. 3 pages in, Moors mentioned.
Well, you can't escape it.
Right.
That's the thing, you know.
So what's our African scholar brother have to say about the Moors? Page 188. By 1492, the Moors had lost all Spain except the kingdom of Granada. The Christians, although not free from internal disputes, were finally united by the marriage of Ferdinand and Isabella, which joined in peace the formerly hostile royal houses of Aragon and Castile. The united Christian forces surrounded the city of Granada and blocked it for 8 months. The Moorish king, Abu Abdallah, also known as Boabdil, finally surrendered. The Moors lingered in Spain for a little more than a century, but by 1610, through expulsion and migration, 1 million, among them many Jews, had returned to northern and western Africa. The word Moor literally means black, so the Moorish people were the black people. Some anthropologists assign them to an arbitrary brown race, and others label them as dark whites. The late Joseph McCabe
Technically correct.
once observed that perhaps an African anthropologist would call the same people pale blacks. In medieval times, the name of Moor was not restricted to the inhabitants of Morocco, but it was customarily to refer to all Africans as Moors. It was a custom to not refer to them as Africans, but to refer to them as Moors. And this is John G. Jackson.
Touch.
Right?
And then to touch on that,
It's in that book.
This is Golden Age of the Moors, page 194. This is part of Jose Pimenta Bay's like section of the book, because it's broken up with him and Ivan Van Sertima and a couple other people who Diop, who have dissertations, and this is a compilation basically. So I mean, again, to speak on the African historians knowing about the Moors and not trying to go against them. Yeah, at the bottom it says edited by Ivan Van Sertima. So he's not the author, right? I just want to point that out. Anyone who doesn't own the book or hasn't read it, this is a collection of like Jose Pimenta Bay is a history professor, a history of Moorish, professor of Moorish history, right? A Moor, and
What university is that?
down in I forget what it's called.
West Virginia? Or?
A small one.
Virginia or Kentucky or something.
Now there's a brother named Mamadou Chinyalu, Scobie, Edward Scobie, Ali. I don't know which Ali this is. Carew. Like all these people are writing about Moors. I don't know, I don't know if you realize that, but yeah, Golden Age of the Moor. All these people are making sure that they pay homage, they touch on that subject, and they treat it with some sort of honor and dignity. All right, beautiful cover to the book. You know what I mean? It's not. So anyway, he was Cujo was talking about in the Middle Ages, Moors referring to anyone of African descent. Right there in the book. Now in this book, Jose Pimenta Bay section, quote, a Moroccan friend of mine who specializes in linguistics, Professor Aziz Lofty, presented me with some rather interesting information pertaining to the Berbers of North Africa and their origins. Professor Lotfi, who teaches at a Moroccan university, pointed out that Western scholarship has primarily defined the Berbers on linguistic grounds only, while consciously or unconsciously ignoring the ethnic, racial diversity of the Berber-speaking community. Citing the world's major languages edited by B. Comries, Lotfi also points out that many of the Berber languages exhibit Kemetic, Cushitic, and Semitic origins as revealed in their morphology, phonetics, and word orders. Although some Berbers have been linked to Celtic and Nordic origins by a number of French writers of the colonial period, and I'm going to touch on that actually right after in about the Irish origins in ancient and modern Britons. So although some Berbers have been linked to Celtic and Nordic origins by a number of French writers of the colonial period, Lotfi demonstrates that the probability of Berber origins are more likely East African and Cushitic. He offers the following observations. 1. The Dra Valley of southern Morocco is largely regarded as having been inhabited long before the first Canaanite settlement of the 10th century BC by a Cushitic people whose descendants, the Haratins, represent one of the largest Berber-speaking ethnic groups of Morocco. 2. Several Moroccan family names, Kush, Kouash, and Kashani, for example, all denote Cushitic Ethiopian origins. I might add that this also evidently explains the origin of the popular North African food couscous, whose name evidently suggests an Ethiopian origin. And 3. A prominent village, Misra, near the city of Fez, illustrates a connection to East Africa, as Misra, Misraim, is the name given to Egypt Kemet by the Ethiopian/Cushites. Not only do Professor Lotfi's findings support my contention about the synonymity between Berber and Moor, let us not forget that Moor even etymologically designates an Africoid phenotype, but a fascinating correlation is made between the Moors and ancient Kemites. This is something which will be expanded on later. Perhaps one of the most revealing observations of Professor Lotfi was when he informed me that there is no Berber-speaking community in Morocco today, which identifies itself by any name or term which is even distantly related phonetically or morphologically to the term Berber. This is a foreign designation for what was mainly a native people. Okay? So, all you people out there talking about, Moors, those are actually Berbers. You guys aren't Berbers, so whatever. And Berbers are light-skinned people and rah-rah-ray-ray. Right? Like, Grand Sheik told you, we're not talking about skin color, right? This is about nationality and birthrights, 1. And 2, if you really want to talk about Berbers, then look it up. right? Because this is according to Jose Pimenta Bay from what he got from Professor Lotfi, okay? That it's a foreign designation for what was mainly a native people. So that native people of Moors didn't call themselves Berber, right? However, after they got there was that area was called Mauritania, right? And they did call themselves that. Even says further, close historical inquiry and historiographical analysis reveal the racial relationship between the black African of the 8th century of the Moorish invasion and the historical Moor, the so-called Berber, who entered the Iberian Peninsula and profoundly influenced Europe. A look at any number of Europe's books of heraldry, i.e. Fox Davies, or even the coats of arms revealed within the books of the late J.A. Rogers, provides the historical evidence of what many a Moor was. Why do European scholars who discuss North African ethnic origins fail to address the question of why Morocco is called Morocco, or why Mauritania is called Mauritania? How can one single out a much later citizen of Morocco, now mixed with other races, and present him or her as a classic example of the phenotype which dominated the medieval times during Moorish occupation of Spain? Okay.
Also with that, in Jamaica, they have parishes, and one is Westmoreland.
Right.
Yeah.
Westmoreland.
There's places in Australia with the Moor on it too. Remember?
That's right.
Some show and it was Moor something. Can't remember exactly what it was, but it's all over the place. Yeah.
And then I'll just quickly read an excerpt. Yeah. Ancient and Modern Britons, chapter 5. I don't know what page it is because this is a digital version. So, chapter 5, I think the beginning of chapter 5. In addition to the Irish examples already given, there are many other relics of savagedom to be found throughout the United Kingdom, in the present as well as in the past. The horrible practice of disfiguring by cutting off the ears of their victims, perpetrated over and over again during the recent upheaval of the dregs of the Irish people, a practice which was also quite common in 15th century Scotland, is a slightly modified form of such barbarities as those performed on the dead bodies of the men of Herefordshire by the followers of the irregular and wild Glendower, barbarities which were lately paralleled by the Zulus in the last war, as those who found the corpses of their former comrades know too well. And one custom which proclaims a connection between the marsh dwellers of Scotland and those of Borneo is the custom of head hunting, still practiced in the latter country. As regards Scotland, there are, or were at the date of Martin's tour last century, tangible proofs of this. In describing one district in the Isle of Egg, he states, about 30 yards from the church there is a sepulchral urn underground. It is a big stone hewn to the bottom, about 4 feet deep, and the diameter of it is about the same breadth. I caused them to dig the ground above it, and we found a flat, thin stone covering the urn. It was almost full of human bones, but no head among them. And they were fair and dry. I inquired of the natives what was what was become of the heads, and they could not tell. But one of them said, perhaps their head had been cut off with a two-handed sword and taken away by the enemy. Although not actually proving that the custom of head hunting did at one time exist in that neighborhood, the evidence of the headless frames and the suggestion of the native point to the probability of such a thing, though at a period so far back that the peasantry had almost forgotten it. But unmistakable testimony is afforded by an ancient poem to be found in the selection from the dead Lismore's book, translated by Dr. McLaughlin of Edinburgh. The author of the poem is stated by the learned translator to have been the most ancient of all the Ossianic poets and a contemporary of Cuchulainn, who flourished according to Irish historians in the 1st century. So anyway, it goes on and talks about this poem. So the quotation from the poem is, quote, who is that hairy, black, great head, with cheeks than any rose more red? That which hangs nighest thy left arm, the head whose color has not changed. The head of the king of Swiss steeds owned, said Cairbar's son of vigorous lance. In vengeance for my foster son I took that head and bore it far. What head is that I see beyond, covered with smooth soft flowing hair, his eyes like grass, his teeth like bloom, his beauty such as none is like? Okay. They were no fewer than, this is a note from so a note about the whoever it was who was cutting off these heads. There were no fewer than 15, and Connell not only has the assurance to say that he killed all their owners, but further, whenever asks him how many men he had slain altogether, in vengeance for the head of Khan, he replies, 10 and 700 men. I tell the truth, the number is that fell by me, all back or back, fruit of my bravery and power. Right? So chopping off heads, that was this king of this poem was proud of it, right? In Scotland. And then like he had a head on his arm. It was just there. And the poem asks, whose head is that you have on your arm? And then whose head is that you have that other head over there? Right? And then what I read before talks about the urn with body bones in it and no skulls. Okay, and then talking about the connection between even more southern Africans, right? Zulus, right? The irregular barbarity of cutting off the ears that was found in Herefordshire, the men of Herefordshire, right? So that's something to maybe look more, do some more research on. But
Right, so remember that we are tied up from George G. Jackson about the Africans know about the Moors.
Right.
And talking about the Moors from a third-party perspective, which is them denationalizing themselves,
Right on.
right? Or they took a check, and that's the way that the contract goes. That's how you have to talk about them if we're going to make you write this big book, right? You're not going to be able to, say what you want type of thing. You know what I mean? Right? So we're going to go to right now, and this is for certain people who like to like go to the scholars and ask them arrogantly or ignorantly Negro colored African, movement or perspective is something real and legit because, so and so speaks about it and norms.
Yeah.
They look like, they know what different names they fall under, even the quote unquote black historians, right? And the reality that the African, black, Negro colored civil rights liberation movement is what they're lacking is the correct perspective. Because we know that they want unity. That's why they say that they're black people. We'll just call ourselves black people, right? Okay, yes, we know what you're talking about. We know what you're talking about when you say, yes, African people. But in the position that we are under occupation, to identify yourself with something that you're not, just for the simple fact that we're under occupation, right? You're committing a fraud. And instead of calling them on the fraud, they would just use them as an economic base to keep the debt credit system running. When all these people have to do is proclaim their nationality and get on the other side of the fence.
Yeah.
decide that they never ever considered, even though, like, because it's not like Noble Drew Ali came in 1913. We don't really have to, we're doing this because, Noble Drew Ali said that we have to be active, we have to be putting out certain information, right? So this is really the only reason, right? But I rather not be doing this, right? I rather us let's go have a think tank, right? And we all go study and get the studying part done in multiple numbers instead of individual numbers. Because these are the books that people have at their house.
True.
These books that people read say that they're the, Afrocentrists, chematologists. They read all this stuff, right? And it's obvious that there's a deliberate motive of one not mentioning the Moors, and then if you do mention it, right? If you do mention it in a third party perspective.
Right, yeah.
Right? So this is Dr. Ben now. Right?
How much stuff am I? Oh, I'm just going to take that. Oh.
This is Dr. Ben.
Yeah.
Right? The amazing phenomena about the African Moors in Spain.
Okay.
Now, if he's saying African Moors, and we're going to, like, Dr. Ben is one of our scholars.
Mm-hmm.
He specifically said African Moors in his book.
I hear you.
Africa, Mother of Western Civilization, Dr. Joseph A. Ben Yakinen. Right? For these people who like to say that they're African, but want to say, well, I don't want to call myself a Moor because the Moor is Okay, well, Dr. Ben said that Africans are Moors. Right?
Yeah.
And Africa, or African, is the geographical location, not the identity.
Exactly.
So Africans are Moors. Right? The amazing phenomena about the African Moors in Spain is that they extended their rule for 200 years from 1285 to 1485 in Granada, when in all other parts of Spain, the Arab Moors
Okay.
had already been driven out by the Christian Spaniards in 1285. The African Moors, the first to enter Spain in 711, were in fact the last to leave in 1485, which was only 7 short years before an African Moor named Pietro Alonso Nino became captain of the flagship Santa Maria.
Boom. Big one. That's a big one right there.
Right, so in 1485, which was only 7 short years after an African Moor named Pietro Alonso Nino became captain of the flagship Santa Maria, which was the lead ship of the expedition that Cristobal Colon commanded at Asmarante Admiral. Right, and where it says Cristobal Colon, it has 2 asterisks there. So the asterisks. This was the original name of the man called Christopher Columbus in the history books of the United States of America. The African who sailed the ship on which Colon served as admiral and explorer was born in what is today called Morocco. There are certain basic facts which one must remember about this period of history when the Africans ruled the Iberian Peninsula. Spain was captured by the African general Tariq quite a few years before the arrival of the Arab Moors in Spain. And history is quite definite in its description that Tariq was a quote-unquote black man. Just as any other black man, one is subject to see on the streets of the United States of America who is being called Negro and other such names not of this making or selection. General Tariq was the first of the Moors to capture the first part of the Iberian Peninsula. So he said that General Tariq is a black man, just like any other black man, right, that you would see on the streets of North America, that people are going to classify as Negro, but he didn't go back and say General Tariq was the first black man that accomplished the feat of 711 AD. He said General Tariq was the first of the Moors. And there's a reason why he has black man in quote and quotes in the book. Because that's not the real identity. Dr. Ben's telling us this now. It's not what I'm saying.
What did he say Christopher Columbus's true name was again?
Cristobal Colon. Crstobal Cristobal Colon. Right. He accomplished his feat in the year 711. He had also fought against the Arab Muslims, so even Spain at that time, right? He had also fought against the Arab Muslims from Arabia in 680. This before his own capture by them and his subsequent conversion to Islam to save his own life